like to call to order the meeting of the Wilson School Board for Monday, March 18th, 2019. Can I have roll call, please? Here.
Mr. Arlen? Mr. Hart? Here. Mr. Hoff? Here. Dr. Kennedy? Here. Mrs. Cocker? Here. Mr. Martin? Here. Mr. Negrini? Here. Mr. Wolf? Here. 9 present, 0 absent.
Thank you. Will we all please rise for our JROTC to post the colors?
First, sir, request permission to post colors. Colors, post. Right, face, mark time, march, forward, march.
Thank you. Please be seated. Mr. Moravich.
Announcement on public participation. There's 2 opportunities for the public to address the board. First is on agenda items, which is will be next, and the second is on non-agenda items, which is at the end of the meeting. I understand that the ones we have tonight are for non-agenda items, so they'll be at the end of the meeting. Pursuant to board policy and the Sunshine Law, it is a 3-minute opportunity. It is not question and answer, but it is an opportunity to provide the board with information on matters that are or may come before it.
Thank you. Up next, we have a presentation by architect Crabtree and Rohrbaugh regarding our facilities update.
Good evening, everyone. Administration had asked that we present an update to the progress of our work that we've completed to date and give you a snapshot of what is moving forward. So tonight we're going to talk about kind of an overview of the study process, some of the accomplishments so far with regard to the educational program envisioning exercise, some guiding principles explanation. We've also started an enrollment and capacity evaluation, looking at not only the current enrollment but projected through the Department of Education as well, and the facility assessments, the actual building assessments that the architectural and engineering team has undertaken, and then talk about a timeline. So this first piece of the study process outlines 5 kind of key steps. You can see under the first step, we've really started with the focus on educational program envisioning, talking about what is unique to your district and what is unique about your educational program. We continue to be in the process of gathering information for further assessments like the enrollment and facility, even utility cost data for analysis. We'll then move into that analysis phase where we start looking at benchmarking energy usage, how the buildings accommodate your current educational program, and then any projected needs and what that utilization might look like in the future. Then we start developing options to address the deficiencies and what a project might look like, but really the objective here is to build a roadmap for the board to help prioritize where facility and programming needs may need to be. that we arrive at this last step for recommendations for both short and long-term planning district-wide. So the first thing that we start looking at is recognizing how schools have changed. The model on the upper left really represents kind of the industrial typical school, double-loaded corridor, built for capacity, and little interaction and little flexibility. And the model on the right, is the same footprint, the same square footage, but just shows how school design has changed, the educational environment has changed, and how we can repurpose that same square footage to be more flexible and provide collaboration for students and faculty and staff. And it also shows that education is occurring everywhere, so corridors into themselves are not just means of egress. There's opportunity for those spaces to open up for some transparency into each of the individual spaces. Ultimately, this is the objective, is to create an educational program that is supported by the vision and the board of where you want to go educationally. The facility study will outline what things might need to occur in the buildings to accommodate that long-range vision. So the guiding principles are about a process of obtaining information from various stakeholder groups, from the administration through elementary, middle, and high school, board members, public, parents, students, community members, and so forth. And through this process, we try to identify what of each of those categories are important, are unique, and bring them to the table so that we make sure that as options are being developed, those key items are kept at the forefront and really are the guiding principles to making decisions about what options and what improvements might need to be made. This is an example of the visioning exercise we were able to complete or conduct last Thursday. We did the elementary group where we had some students, parents, community members, administrators, principals, all present to go through this process of where we start looking at various images of work that we have done, images of projects we've collected over the years, and each participant gets some green and red dots. And basically we go through an exercise where we start talking about what things are favorable, what things are ideal, what things are not relevant or current in the facilities now, and why. How is furniture becoming a kind of a dominant issue with regard to the usability of a space or space's ability to be used for more than one purpose. And then you just start having this dialogue about input from not only the students, but as the administrators are present, and then they hear that dialogue, and then vice versa. So that starts talking about, you know, what are the unique things that if a project were contemplated that everyone would like to see incorporated into a project. So it's really about listening, but it's a good exercise when you start talking about some of the intangibles that are not, you know, typical program items, you know, social spaces for middle school, secondary. That bottom left image is kind of taking the place of what school design used to be in terms of just a traditional large group instruction room. Now there are learning stairs where you're trying to open up large lobbies. You could bring 2 or 3 classes together and try and incorporate something like this that could be used, you know, throughout the day, at the beginning of the school day, at the end of the day. Every group in the building could utilize it if it's set up properly and designed for presentation. So kind of spark everyone's curiosity and with regard to program. The second piece is the enrollment analysis. This is the Department of Education's enrollment projection for the district. The last time that they had updated it was December of 16, so they're a little behind. We're not really sure when the next update will be. But in addition to the Department of Education, we are also conducting our own enrollment projection, and we're using your actual enrollment data. We've already gone back 5 years. We're now going to go back 10 years and try to compare and contrast trends to ultimately arrive at what do we believe is a reasonable planning number for planning future projects and growth within the district. The next piece is the capacity analysis. This is where we take a look at each of the existing buildings, their current use of space, and we look at how the buildings are able to accommodate those programs as the building is currently configured. We also start asking the question about students per classroom, what should those utilization rates be, and are you approaching where you, at a facility where your enrollment is high, are you running out of space? Or when will you run out of space? And what is the plan for when you reach that ultimate threshold of utilization? The next piece is the facility condition index or assessment. This is a tool that we prepare for each building. And you can see on the left-hand side, there's a description, starting with the site, cover all of the building components, the exterior, the roofing, the windows, the entire envelope, interior finishes, casework. But then really what becomes unique is if you see the description and the scale, to try to give some relevance to time. Is something urgent that it needs to be replaced? Is something not meeting your needs currently? Or is there something that you have a 5 or 8 or 10 year time period before it becomes a critical issue? So we interject the area, a time, provided some comments and recommendations on what would need to be the change to occur to make that system perhaps code compliant, perhaps meet your security expectations or a next generation of that. And then to the far right is a cost range. It's a facility study. It's not intended to be a final project cost, but it gives you an order of magnitude. If we're talking about building X and the roofing, what is the relative dollar value if the roof needs to be completely replaced? And try and give you some guidance in that regard. So we're in process with this, as well as the educational suitability assessment. This is kind of the relationship of the program, the capacity in the buildings. Basically, do the buildings provide the types of educational spaces that you need, and also not only the current use, but your projected use. We start looking at equity among all the buildings, which is very important in a study, to try to make sure we're establishing a baseline where some buildings might have deficient spaces and others not. How do you address equity in all the facilities and all the programmatic areas? So through the assessment, this is an example. This is not one of your district buildings. I wanted to show you an example of a tool that we use where we start identifying, space like a gymnasium that might be internal, that is difficult to have the public come into the building and secure the rest of the building. You'll see area where the administration is significantly inboard from the front entrance of the building, so security supervision is an issue. The arrow swinging to the right is indicating kind of a separation where a grade is broken up. So team teaching, and when teachers want to bring 2 or 3 classes together, is the building just organized in such a way that that doesn't occur because they're not adjacent to each other. And then when you have a seating area, kitchen and cafeteria that's inadequate and that becomes inboard to the existing building, how do you expand a space like that that kind of demands a lot of square footage? And then lastly is when you have support spaces that are internal. Even at the elementary visioning exercise last week with your students and staff, we heard there's a lot of spaces that have no daylighting. So that's an organizational principle. This is the example then when we as architects look at, okay, if we recognize those deficiencies, what kind of reorganization of the building could address all of those things? So you'll see, that intercommunicating stair now is something internal to the building that is okay without daylighting. But there needs to be a means to communicate from the first and second floor, and then move all those spaces to the exterior where they can have daylighting. Start to group all the classrooms together so there's that better organization and adjacency that'll allow team teaching. And then probably most important is move the administration up front so they have the ability to control provide a secure entrance and sequence in and out of the building. One of the items as part of a study and an assessment is to determine a benchmark for what the board's expectations are with regard to, if you contemplate a project, is it the board's desire to do a comprehensive project? When you do that in the eyes of the Department of Ed. In the PlanCon world, the expectation is that you are, in fact, doing a comprehensive project if you're seeking reimbursement. Their thought is that if the district is going to entertain reimbursement, that the building has a 20-year look ahead. So building code compliance, educational program, organization, adjacency, all those building systems, the Department of Education's model would expect that that's what you would do. However, the second scenario, where the budget would determine the scope, is where a board may say, we have X dollar value for these projects, and then we would build a scope to meet that dollar value. So that's a little discussion further down the road, but certainly a important part of the study itself. And the last piece is a timeline. What we were asked to do is to try to highlight all the tasks on the left in their various categories, again, starting with that first slide with planning, development, analysis, then recommendation. And you'll see that over the next few months, we go back, we revisit each of these issues. It takes a few evolutions to nail down these items, the interaction with the board and the public, to get to a point where typically a study can take 5 to 7 months. Depends on duration and other issues, complexity of the projects potentially. But then the real takeaway here too is from the time the study is in essence complete, and the board would say we establish this as priority number 1. If that is a building project, the design process then can take 8 to 10 or 12 months for the regulatory review and approval process, and then you have the construction duration, which could be anywhere from 12 to 24 months. So really the takeaway is from the time the study is done that we agree that priority project A will start. It can be a 2 to 3 year period till those changes and those improvements get implemented for the students and staff to see that impact. So that's our overview. If there are any questions or comments, this is the first of many presentations that we'll be making as we come back to the board.
Yeah.
Just for the public knowledge, all of the meetings that we've had with Crabtree, Rohrbaugh, and Associates, all of the meeting minutes are posted on our district website. So you will see the comprehensive minutes. You will also see the presentations that they've put together. And those are updated every time we have a meeting. They're up within 2 to 3 days afterwards. We want the public to be very informed about where we're at each step of the process so that there aren't any surprises down the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Just an announcement that the board did meet in an executive session on March 4th, March 7th, and again on March 14th to discuss a personnel issue, and then again this evening before tonight's meeting to discuss a taxation issue. Moving along, looking for a request to approve the minutes. Here's my screen updates for March 4th, 2019. Mrs. Cocker, thank you. Mr. Ehrlich, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Treasurer's report, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight the Treasurer's report, investment report, general fund report, and other financial reports as presented.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Ehrlich, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
This is 9-4, 0
Mr. President, I submit for approval tonight payment bills in the amount of $2,453,685.89 and $5,000 out of the capital reserve account.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Mr. Case, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Hart? Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mrs. Cocker? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
This is 9-4, 0 against.
Thank you. Financial reports, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, Smith for approval. February reports for the cafeteria, child care, Southern Middle School, Wilson West Middle School, and Senior High.
Thank you. Second, Mr. Ehrlich, thank you. Roll call.
Mr. Hart? Yes. Mr. Howe? Yes. Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mrs. Cocker? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. DeGreenie?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Thank you. Superintendent's report, Dr. Fadley.
Thank you, President Wolf. It's my privilege this evening to present the superintendent's report, inclusive of personnel and program recommendations. Before the board votes on this item, I'd also like to point out there is one retirement, Gail Rimley, who is a custodian at Cornwall Terrace. Her retirement will be effective March 29th of this year, and she has served the Wilson School District for 22 years. So we wish her well.
Thank you. Looking for a motion for 6.1 through 6.9. Yes.
Could you take out Mr. Myers' resignation and put it aside so we can vote on that individually?
It is later as well. I don't know if you know, do you want to do it both times?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so let's do 6.1, 6.2, and then 6.4 through 6.9. Do I have a motion for that? Mr. Hart, thank you. Second? Mr. Negrini, thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Wolf,
Yeah.
briefly, regarding the high school for reimbursements, it was a fantastic touch that this was a live musical performance that went along with the performance of our students. They sounded fantastic. The adults that not only performed, some of whom donated their time, was, I thought, a special touch to what was a special weekend as far as the performance of Les Mis. And I want to personally thank all of the adults that made the students' time this weekend that much more special. Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Hart? Yes. Mrs. Cocker? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
All right, so then I'm looking for a motion to accept 6.3 with the exception of Mr. Myers' resignation. We'll do that afterwards. Do I have a motion for that? Mr. Hart, thank you. Second, Mr. Case. Roll call, please.
Kennedy? Yes. Mrs. Cocker? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
That's 9-4, 0 against.
Okay, and finally, the last item, Mr. Myers' resignation. Do I have a motion for that? Mr. Hart, thank you. Mrs. Cocker, second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cocker? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yeah.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Howe?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
That's
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving along to field trips. Looking for a motion to approve the 4 students to attend the Math Counts state competition and Harrisburg as presented. Do I have a motion for that? Mrs. Cocker, thank you. Mr. Hart, second. And I believe this already happened, but we're certainly proud to sponsor that and congratulate them. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Under HR, looking for a motion to approve to enter into an independent contract with Christina M. Williams as presented. 8.2, looking for a motion to approve to compensate Christina Siegfried, autistic support teacher at the high school, $800 a month for IEP facilitator responsibilities effective 3/15/19. 8.3, looking for a motion to approve the memorandum of understanding between Wilkes University Reading Specialist Program and the Wilson School District as presented. We're going to skip 8.4 for now. 8.5, looking for a motion to approve human resources items 8.1 and through 8.3. Yep. Do I have a motion for those three? Mr. Hart, thank you. Second. Mr. Ehrlich, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cochran? Yes. Mr. Martin? Greenie? Yes. Mr. Case? Yes. Mr. Ehrlich? Yes. Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hoff?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
All right, now looking for a motion to request the approval of the resignation and release agreement between the Wilson School District and Douglas R. Meyer dated 3/18/2019. Do I have a motion? Mr. Hart, thank you. Second. Mrs. Cocker, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Greenie?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
No.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hoff?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mrs. Cochran? Yes. Mr. Wolf? That's 8-4, 1 against.
Okay, moving on, 9.1, looking for a motion to approve the BCTC General Fund operating budget as presented. The board needs to take action on a taxpayer situation. Mr. Ehrlich, if you want to explain that and make that motion.
Do we want to
Pull that out and do it separately? Yep,
We need a
yep.
separate motion. I think we have
Yep,
to pull
that's
that
fine.
separate.
All right, so we're going to skip that, go to 9.3, looking for a motion to approve a 36-month lease for the behind-the-wheel driver education instructional vehicle as presented, and looking for a motion to approve the budget transfers dated February 14th, 2019 through March 13th, 2019. So motion 9.1, 9.2, and 9.4. Mr. Case, thank you. Second. Mr. Hart?
Did you say 9.2? It's not 9.2.
I'm sorry, it's 9.1, 9.3, and 9.4. It's still motion, thank you. Second, Mr. Hart, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Greenie?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hoff? Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mrs. Cochran? Yes. Mr. Wolf? That's 9-4, 0 against.
You want to explain 9.2?
9.2. I move or reject the settlement offer that was presented earlier this evening in executive session.
Do I have a second? Mr. Negrini, thank you. Roll call, please.
I'll just make
Yeah, go ahead, read that
want to
statement.
make a
Yep.
comment. Due to the taxpayer confidentiality, this matter may not be discussed in detail in the public. The board is prohibited by law from disclosing the identity of the taxpayer or any information about their business or gross receipts or the assessments against them. The matter was discussed thoroughly in executive session, and based on that discussion, the above motion has been made. Correct, to reject. The motion is to reject.
The motion is to reject. Any other comments or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Ehrlich? Mr. Hart? Mr. Hoff? Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cochran? Mr. Martin? Mr. Wolf? That's 9-4, 0 against.
Thank you. Under extracurricular, looking for a motion to approve the athletic program mission statement as presented. Do I have a motion for that? Mrs. Cocker, thank you. Second. Mr. Ehrlich, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich? Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Hoff? Dr. Kennedy? Mrs. Cocker? Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf? That's 9-4, 0 against.
Under policies, we have a final reading and adoption of policies 239, 249, 250, and 251. So looking for a motion to approve and adopt those policies. Mrs. Cocker, thank you. Mr. Case, thank you. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Ehrlich?
Yes.
Mr. Mr. Howe? Yes. Dr. Kennedy? Yes. Mrs. Cocker? Yes. Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Wall?
Yes.
That's 9-4, 0 against.
A second reading of 237, 241, and 248 with no vote. Moving on to committee reports. Mr. Case, BCTC.
We have not had a meeting since our last Wilson Board meeting, but I'll just talk a little bit about, for a moment, for what we just approved with regard to the budget. Can you lower my mic just a little bit, please? Thank you. The total budget for BCTC was $18.7 million, which is an increase of 1.75%, roughly $539,000. However, for Wilson, just in general, we get charged, each school district gets charged for the average of the last 3 years of our participation in the numbers that we send to BCTC. Our numbers, and administration and I are aware of this, and we are asking questions and looking into this. Our numbers 3 years ago were 120 students that we would send. We're down to 94 for this particular year. So our numbers have slid, yet participation in other districts is going up. So we need to kind of understand the reasoning behind that. And is it a Wilson thing, or is it the program alignment? There's a lot of great programs at BCTC, and I don't feel where Wilson is taking advantage of all of them. And the administration agrees, so we're looking into that. Just wanted to let everybody know that. The 50th anniversary is coming up for BCTC. That is April 27th, 2019, from 11 to 3 p.m. at the East Campus in Oley, Pennsylvania. So there's all sorts of food trucks, car shows, you can take a tour of the student-built house that they're building right now and learn about a lot of the great programs that are going on at BCTC. I think there's animals and cows, all sorts of fun stuff going on, a car show. And also want to remind everybody that I believe the tickets are $20 each. There's 2 cars, well, 1 truck and 1 car that are being raffled off, like an antique Corvette that was restored by some of the students at BCTC, also an antique truck that they are raffling off. And I believe the tickets, they're only selling 1,000 tickets, $20 a pop for each. And they're not selling out of these, so there are tickets available. So they'll be raffling off those vehicles during that. So anyway, our next meeting is March 21st on the East Campus, which is this week, and that's all I have. If anyone has any questions about the budget, you can speak to, you can ask me, or we can talk to someone at the BCTC for any details or getting into the weeds. So.
Bipartisan bill to improve education in the areas that you're speaking about. We're pretty blessed that we have a great opportunity, but the Commonwealth understands there's a shortage, needs a certain type of occupations, electricians, plumbers, mechanics, and they're expanding the ability of students that do not have the ability to go to a school like we have here to help that, along with agriculture. There's been a brain drain in agriculture in Pennsylvania, so they passed some bills to improve that. So people really need to address this issue. And I know it's disappointing to hear those numbers, but it's important to get people directed to the right organizations for them to obtain whatever skills they have to make themselves a better person. They don't all have to go to college.
And one of the things that we've looked into, and I'm just learning in the last few months, is when I started trying to walk through the experience of a student trying to figure out whether they're going to go to BCTC or not, within, you figure a student goes to high school here at Wilson, and within 3 weeks, they have to make a decision of what program they're going to choose at BCTC. And that's a big commitment, because then you're only taking the 4 core classes and you're giving up all your electives and then all the other things. It's quite a commitment to say, I'm going to jump 2 feet into BCTC. So there may be some options that, a lot of the districts don't talk with regard to issues like that at the JOC meeting. And it might be something that we can pull together a bunch of the districts, because we are the customer, and kind of suggest, hey, can we delay this a little bit, about what kind of a program we're going to go into, just so you can get a better feel of high school before you jump into making such a big decision. So anyway, that's...
I had that conversation with one of my sons who, was looking at a number of options, but, maybe physical therapy, maybe even criminal justice. And I know there's opportunities for both of those, but when I brought it up, he said, well, I can't start now, unfortunately, as a sophomore. So if could be some blended
Flexibility or-
flexibility to
yeah.
do it, he would maybe have considered it.
Yeah, they're doing a pilot program for doing things later, but it's not well vetted
Yeah.
just yet, so,
Yeah.
anyway.
Okay, thank you.
I think we've also talked in prior meetings about starting the information process for both the students and the parents earlier in middle school. I think that is the time that information needs to be provided, that education on the program needs to be fully vetted so that it gives both parents and students plenty of time to understand everything that the BCTC has to offer.
Right.
Because as you said, it's not only a matter of those students making that decision within that 3-week window of time, but by then, certainly a decision may be made going into high school that that's something that they're not going to do at all, as opposed to being exposed to it at a much earlier point in their educational lives. So I would encourage, both from the BCTC standpoint of some type of an immersion program, even on a short-term basis in middle school, and the district here looking into that at an earlier stage.
And there is a week-long camp in the summertime to sort of see all their programs, but between sports and everything, like it's kind of hard to block out a week in the summertime to go through all that.
Right.
But I agree with you, yes,
Right.
absolutely.
One more comment, I don't know if you're 50% of the students that graduate from college do not get a job in their major, which is pretty scary.
Right. So we have some work to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kenny, you want to do IU and curriculum, please?
We have not met for the IU or the curriculum committee since our last meeting, but we do have a curriculum committee meeting tomorrow in Dr. Amy Flannery's office at 4 o'clock.
Thank you. Mrs. Schlossman, anything for EIT?
All I have is our next meeting is March 28th at 6 p.m. at the Governor Mifflin Education Center. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As far as extracurricular, obviously we've been hearing rave reviews. I unfortunately did not make Les Mis, but Mr. Negrini, I understand you were there, and everyone I've heard talk about it sounds like it was an incredible show. So congratulate all those students involved in that. Our winter sports are finally wrapped up. Our swim team had a great showing at the state tournament. I have a large list of students here. I'm going to try to narrow it down to just the students that placed fourth place or better. Under our girls program, our girls swim team, the 400 free relay of Shelby Kahn, Sophie Appler, Riley Wenzel, and Caitlin Bidding finished fourth in the state. And overall, our girls finished 7th in the state, which is amazing. That's great. Our boys, we had the 400 free relay team of Caleb Eberly, Brody Heckman, Malachi Eberly, and Donovan Curran finished 4th as well. That leadoff, I think there was a little article, the leadoff Caleb Eberly actually set a school record for the 100 freestyle in that race as well. So the boys finished 6th overall in the state as well. We also, as we wrapped up winter sports, we had a wrestler, Brandon Connor, took 7th in the state for wrestling, and our boys bowling, Aiden Zalza, took 2nd place in the state for boys bowling, and the team took 4th. So had a great wrap up to our winter sports. Spring is just getting started. We finally got the snow off the fields and turf, so we're well underway. Facilities, Mr. Negrini.
Thank you, Mr. Wolf. We had a joint Facilities and Finance Committee meeting earlier this evening at 5 o'clock. The topic of discussion was the reconfiguration of the athletic fields at the high school. We've been milling around the idea of relocating the varsity baseball field back to the high school campus. And it is the recommendation of the Facilities Committee to move forward with that project to engage Spring Township and the Conservation District relative to permits, water runoff, and then we are looking to receive some final numbers relative to the costs associated with that particular project, whether or not to add lights to the fields of baseball and softball, and whether or not to make those fields turf as opposed to grass. There was lots of colorful conversation about the pros and cons of both, but obviously we have to take into consideration the costs relative to those particular add-ons, and certainly how it impacts the short-term time upon which baseball and softball have to complete their seasons as it currently stands on our campus with lights on other fields, and that they are turfed. They certainly are not impacted as much as our baseball and softball teams are relative to playing on grass and dirt that becomes soft and muddy, and certainly that it's limited in terms of daylight that the other programs don't have to necessarily to deal with. So we're just recommending to move forward with the relocation of the baseball field back to the main campus. No decisions have been made relative to the overall cost of that particular project. That's my report.
Thank you. Mr. Ehrlich, Finance.
Mr. Green mentioned we had a joint Facilities and Finance Committee meeting. On the finance side, we discussed our capital needs and how we're going to finance those depending on what we ultimately decide to do with some general obligation notes and bond financing. We also looked at our capital reserve and a 5-year projection, and we will have our next meeting on April 1st at 4:30.
Okay, thank you. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Not much happening. The budget sessions have been completed yesterday. I don't believe there's an issue other than with the minimum wage. I think that's pretty much going to be between 10 and 11. I'm not sure exactly what that number is going to be, but there will be a compromise there. Of interest is the property tax reform is gaining momentum. Senators Argall, Fulmer, Schwank, and I'll butcher this guy's name, Boscola, asked the Independent Fiscal Office what it would take to have 100% financing of property taxes under the Homestead Act. And the increase would be about 1.8 to 1.9% more than what we're paying. So right now, if they go to 100% tax abatement, the income tax would go up to 4.82% to 4.97%. So there's a little wiggle room in there depending how it works. And that does not take into consideration any other taxes they might increase through the sales tax or anything. So right now there's a lot of things going. In the worst case scenario, they're looking at 100% property relief through income tax, personal income tax. That's it.
Thank you. PR. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you for reminding me. Mr. Hart, anything under HR? I know we don't normally discuss that. That was a mental block on my part. Thank you.
I just have a couple of items, some congratulations to some outstanding students. First, a number of Wilson students received awards from the Berks County Intermediate Unit's secondary art exhibit, which was held at the Goggle Works. So we want to congratulate Ailey Albright, Emily Cherry, Evelyn Nowicki, Isabel Garcia, Ariella Hoover, and Catherine Klein for receiving individual awards in that competition. And of special note is that Catherine Klein's piece won a Fast Lane Art Award, which means her artwork will be on exhibit in April and May at the Freedom Auto Group in Hamburg. And in addition, all artwork selected by the Fast Lane Art Program will be displayed on street pole banners in Reading and West Reading as a public art display, which is pretty cool. Also, a team of students from Green Valley Elementary School recently participated in the 2019 Can Structure Competition, which is designed to help conquer food scarcity and hunger in Berks County. These students, who named their team the Hunger Fighters, were led by Shiloh Hills Elementary teacher Sue Wojciechowski. The students collected over 1,800 items for a combined total of 2,033 pounds of food. And on Saturday, they took their collections to the Berkshire Mall where they built their can structure for the competition. So we're excited to announce that these students took first place in the elementary division. So we're very, very proud of these creative, community-minded students. On Friday, Shiloh Hills second graders received a special treat when they received a $1,000 donation of books and school supplies from J.B. Hunt as part of the company's Adopt a Class project. J.B. Hunt driver and Shiloh Hills parent, John Giglio, nominated his daughter's classroom, and they were chosen as this year's winner. The supplies were delivered in John's truck, and the students got to not only tour the truck, but then they got to unbox all their classroom supplies and have a little party in the classroom. It was a great day for the students and the J.B. Hunt team. I actually got to attend that event, and I will say they were very excited second graders. It was a really neat opportunity. And finally, on March 11th, Wilson High School senior Parker Leonard was featured in a Reading Eagle article about his honors internship program with Quest Diagnostics. The article highlighted our internship program as well as Parker's unique experience working as a flight operations intern. So thank you to the Reading Eagle for sharing Parker's story. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Foundation, Mr. Case.
Some good news for the WEF. It's the 6th annual Wilson Iron Chef competition on Sunday. Just got my ticket today. Everyone else should get their tickets. Last year there were 1,100 people at the Ed Foundation event. And it's one of the big ones for the year for the foundation. So from 1 to 3 p.m., the People's Choice competition in Bender Lane will be open. And then the Wilson Iron Chef competition is from 3 to 5. Also, you can get an early taste at noon if you would so desire and buy a ticket for that. So it's a great event. I saw the volunteer list today. There's a lot of people volunteering, a lot of students volunteering for the event. And there's still some slots open. So if anyone would like to volunteer or sponsor or donate towards the great cause, I'm sure the Ed Foundation would welcome it. And then another bit of news, I believe, on Friday, March 29th, 7:30 a.m., the admin building, there is a meeting for the Wilson Ed Foundation. Why is that not in the public? Is that public thing? It's a public thing. Yeah, so there's a meeting.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah, great. Looking forward to the Iron Chef. Technology, Mrs. Cocker. Thank you. Student outreach, Mr. Russo.
As everyone said already, they've commended the performance of Les Mis this past weekend, but I was able to speak to several of my classmates about their experience, and this was, all of them have said this is one of the largest shows they've done. In the seniors this year, like their 4 years in high school, this is their largest show, and probably years before that. Friday and Saturday night were both sold out, and in fact, Saturday night it was standing room only in the back. So they never usually do that, but people wanted to come so badly they were willing to make it through 4 hours of Les Mis in the back in a very hot auditorium. Despite some unique circumstances that played on Saturday night. Apparently a stomach bug was going around in backstage, but all 3 shows were phenomenal, and I think it was a very memorable performance for all of the students involved. Over this past weekend, as already mentioned by Mr. Wolf, the Wilson boys and girls swim and dive teams concluded their seasons, finally commencing winter sports. Maybe we can finally move into spring weather, hopefully. But I'm a swimmer as well, so I just know how important this meet was to them. Wilson senior Caleb Eberly, his last meet of his high school career, the last event of the day at the last event of that meet. He was able to break the 100-yard freestyle record, which it's the big one. It's like when Usain Bolt runs, like that's the one you want to be doing. So he was very happy. I think there was an article about him in the Reading Eagle that showed him hugging our coach, Coach Schneider. As said before, the girls took 7th place and the boys 6th, and there were several other notable swims, Donovan Curran, Shelby Kahn, that were nearly record-breaking, which is only a good sign for next year, right? This Thursday, the National Honor Society will be holding its annual induction ceremony. Students that satisfy a community service requirement as well as a minimum GPA, I think it's 20-something hours maybe, and a 3-point-something, a high something GPA. But it's all smart kids, I guess. So it's a national academic distinction, and if these students are invited, it'll be sponsored by a current NHS member. The event is very well done, organized by Ms. Taylor and Ms. Radenbush. 4 student officers will present speeches about the intersection of community service and education, how they've seen that in their own lives. we've especially, and I know you, Dr. Fadley, attended one of these. The NHS Club holds a monthly service opportunity at the Opportunity House in Reading, and it really is like a activity that engages the entire club. Students are bringing in hash browns and eggs and gallons of milk, all so they can put on breakfast once a month, starting at 6 a.m. on Saturdays and Sundays. So it's pretty awesome to see that many kids want to come out and help. Also later this week, Wilson students will depart for Costa Rica. If you've heard me talk about the humanitarian and marine biology Jamaica trip, this trip is very similar, very warm, somewhere we would all rather be. But these students and chaperones will bring school supplies, American goods, and a variety of other things to a small village in Costa Rica. The goal of the trip is to completely immerse students in Spanish language and Costa Rican culture. It is the happiest country on earth, supposedly. Students will be challenged to speak strictly Spanish as they stay with a host family for, I think it is a little over a week long. So wish them luck and be jealous of their warm weather, right?
Exactly. That's it? Thank you very much. Mr. Moravich, anything further?
No report.
Okay. Was there anyone that came in late that filled out a slip to speak tonight? Anyone sitting on one? I have two up here from Mr. Saar and, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. We'll call up first Nicole Bowman.
Hello. Hi, I'm Nicole. This is my first time coming to a board meeting, so thank you for having me speak. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids at Green Valley Elementary School, and I wanted to talk tonight about a topic because a lot of the parents, I hear them talking about this topic, and we end up talking over and over about the same topic, and that's recess. Our kids just don't get enough recess at Wilson in the elementary level. And there's such a deep body of research that supports the need for more recess. I have a whole document here that's full of research that supports it, from mental health to better test grades to better behavior to more developed social skills. Recess is just so highly recommended for kids at that age. And basically what happens in elementary school is the kids get 15 minutes for recess before lunch, and my son in kindergarten, I think he ends up getting like 8 minutes by the time they line up and get out there. So it's really not that much. I know a lot of teachers will give them second recess, but that's not scheduled. So I'm just really, I'm hoping that you guys can look at the policy and really consider extending that, making it scheduled so that there's 2 recesses. Consider giving them 60 minutes, which is what the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends, and looking at all the research that supports it, which I have for you if you want it. I'll be circulating a petition among the parents that I'm always talking to, and then I'll hand that over to you so you can look at it, and I'll have all that research and the recommendations for it. So, thank you.
Just a comment real quick. There is a meeting on March 28th where representatives from each one of the elementary schools will be meeting with district administration, and the topic of that conversation is elementary recess. So I just wanted to let you know that. Please provide that research, and I will make sure I share it at that meeting. Okay? Thank you.
My son, my kindergartner, he came home right before Christmas saying to me, "Mom, geez, my class is so bad. I'm a bad kid. We're getting punished, and we're not getting recess." It's getting, like, he was internalizing that he's bad and that his class is bad. So I called his teacher to ask what's going on, what's been up to, and she told me, no, actually, they don't have time to play in the afternoon. They don't have it scheduled. She tries, but sometimes they can't fit it in. So the fact that my kindergartner's coming there and internalizing that he's being punished, I think that's kind of like a story that should really inform the policy. So, thanks.
Certainly my favorite part of the day. Still is.
I mean, if I can share, I'll share a little bit. I'm sure no one will disbelieve this, but I was actually kicked out of preschool. And I found out years later the reasons why, but I had to move around. I mean, I would have been medicated if I would have been growing up in today's day and age, but I had to get out at least an hour during school and run and do stuff. And we played kickball and stuff, and I did Watchdog Dad a couple of weeks ago with my daughter, and you're right, 15 minutes on the blacktop and right back in and eat lunch. And I mean, the days of yore, get out there and play and figure out your own games and stuff, we are missing that in this school district. I really wish we would get that back to that and figure out a way to make it, all the other curriculum stuff work. But I totally agree. I know we're not supposed to comment, but I mean, I found out when I started asking questions when I was about in 7th grade about what happened in preschools because I was kicked out because I just couldn't sit still. Anyway, thought I'd share. Look at me now. I'm on a school board.
That does need to be looked into more, because so often in our days of age of political correctness, I mean, when the topic of recess comes up, it's news articles in the newspaper how it's being eliminated, or you're being told you can't run. And unfortunately, that's not a joke. Those are serious news articles of schools and buildings that have implemented, in my opinion, such absurd policies, and in the name of paranoid litigation management. And I think this is a great topic to look into more.
That in 2010-2011 school year, when we implemented all-day kindergarten, we also added 20 minutes to the school day. We have one of the longest, if not the longest, I have to look and see if anybody changed their time, school day in all of Berks County for our children. I taught kindergarten in the 2001 school year, and that was when we started to talk about all-day K. And in our original all-day K plans, it included a morning recess, an afternoon recess, a lunch recess, and a rest period. And now when I go to kindergarten registration with my children, the teachers are proud that they're so busy during the day, and your kid's gonna come home tired because they're so busy. And I'm not sure that's something I'm proud of, beating little 5-year-olds to death during the day. It's interesting that Mr. Case said that he would have been medicated had he been a student today. I was the last person in my gifted class to read. So there were 12 other kids in my class, and they all read. And I know the day I read, I figured out how to read, because the next day they put the reading books away, and we all get to read real books. But I didn't read until I was almost 7 years old. So I started to read in October. I didn't turn 7 till December. I would have been in RTI, in reading recovery. I'm sure I probably would have been medicated because my mouth never stops. But I would have had a completely and totally different trajectory for my life had I been born 20 years later. I have 3 degrees in reading now. 3 in reading. And I would have been in special ed reading as a first grader instead of in a gifted class. My story about my son is when my kids get off the bus, they burst off the bus. And first thing they do is they shove food in their mouth because they're so hungry when they get home. The second thing they do is run around the house like crazy maniacs because they've been sitting all day long. And if you think about a factory, I worked when I was a senior in college to try and earn money at a perfume factory. And we used to have to put the little things in the bottles, and I was terrible at it. Thank God I don't have to be a factory worker. But we would get a full half-an-hour lunch break and 2 15-minute breaks. And if we stayed any longer, if we did overtime, then they would have to give us another 15-minute break on top of that. So we're treating our factory workers, better because of the law than we are our children. And I think that's just absolutely shameful. And I'm thrilled we're having a recess meeting March 28th, but I don't understand why that's necessary. to have recess, it could happen tomorrow. We don't have to have a meeting to make it happen. It could literally happen tomorrow. And I think it should happen tomorrow. When I taught 6th grade, when the schools were K to 6, we had scheduled recess for every grade, 1st through 6th grade. Now, we didn't do kindergarten because we only had them for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and that included 25 minutes of free play, and a 20-minute snack, and a 25-minute special. So the kids didn't need recess. But I still took them out every once in a while because if you know kindergarten, like those, like, they can be crazy and they sometimes need to go out. So I don't understand with a 20-minute longer school day why we have the big to-do. Kids go to recess, you schedule it, done. Can be done tomorrow. You shouldn't let me talk, sorry.
Yeah, come on up.
Yeah. As a middle school presenter, I see the kids that come to me and they don't have the behavior skills that you need to learn in elementary school that you learn from recess, that you learn from free play, that you learn from centers, that you learn from those times. And I'm sick of, don't quote me. My name's in the paper way too much. Please, I'm begging you. So I see it, and I see that they're coming to us without proper skills to learn how to work with other students, how to sit quietly from quiet time in a circle, or then going outside and having that free play and having that variety of activities, because they're having a science curriculum in kindergarten now, rather than having that time. And they come to us, even in gym class, and don't even know how to even behave properly in our class. And then I take them out for recess. I work 8th grade lunch, and I take them out for recess, and even that, they're still overwhelmed and have confusion in how to even participate accurately at that time, and how to behave like a typical 8th grader, because they haven't had the opportunity to learn those skills from kindergarten on up. And I'm seeing it from a behavior standpoint too. Things that are going on I can share just today in my building, which is out of hand, just because they don't have those skills and those cooperation and ability to work together and ability to have conversations and just free play that then would lead to, by the time they get to middle school, having appropriate dialogue at a middle school level that they would learn during that time. So I think it's huge, and I'm so glad you're having that meeting. I agree that it's a shame we even have to have that, but I did actually teach kindergarten when I first finished teaching in North Carolina for 2 months, and we had a full day of kindergarten, and we had a 20-minute nap. No joke, I would lay down myself. We had an hour of centers. We had 2 recesses, 30 minutes long. We had snacks. We had that time, and we were able to teach them how to behave appropriately sitting there and eating a snack and picking up the trash off the floor that our middle school kids don't even understand how to do and aren't equipped to do. So I think it's so important that we go back and start from the bottom up in teaching these kids how to behave appropriately and have the correct behavior so that it carries through, so we don't see the things that are happening at our middle school and high school level.
I deal with a lot of young kids, and the missing part of it is the parenting of the children. And I understand what you're saying, that that's, getting out and doing things. But with today's society, with the games, the computers, so many kids opt for those versus going out and playing games. I see it in scouting, Cub Scouting. Some of the parents that are more involved, their students, their scouts are better behaved. But it's a combination. I mean, I don't have an answer to this, but it's just not an easy thing. Getting out and having recess, and I think that's good. I 100% support having 2 20-minute recesses, but for different reasons. I think the kids need to get out, run, understand there's other things you can do. You can make up games and things like that. But I just think that this is a much bigger animal than just a little rabbit. The recess we can control, correct.
Great. One of the better conversations we've had in a while. Anyone else? All right. Next up, Eric Saar.
My name is Eric Saar, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm concerned that Wilson has a toxic, fear-based culture that threatens its ability to excel as a learning institution. As the spouse of a teacher who recently resigned in February due to this toxic culture, I saw firsthand what it did to an excellent teacher. Over the last 4 years, I watched my wife return to teach at Wilson as a proud alumni, where she began her career and was excited to teach in the elementary gifted program. I watched as she juggled 3 schools and tried to balance an unreasonable caseload. In 3 years, I watched the entire elementary gifted staff she started with resign and leave Wilson to go to other places. I watched as she worked 60 to 70 hours a week in order to support her students and meet her deadlines. I watched as, despite years of praise from parents, principals, and colleagues, she was targeted by an administrator who had never even observed her teaching or watched her lead a GIEP meeting. I watched as her punishment was a schedule change deliberately designed to make her job impossible, a change seemingly intended to drive her to quit her job. I watched as her health suffered over the course of a month as she lost 17 pounds, could not sleep, and skipped lunch in order to try to make this ridiculous schedule work. And I watched as she repeatedly asked administrators for help, but not one stepped up and demonstrated true leadership. I watched as my wife's heart broke over her decision to ultimately leave Wilson, not out of a desire to stop educating children, but because we wanted to teach our kids that you don't have to stay in an abusive situation, and sometimes you have to stand up to bullies for yourself and for those who don't have a voice. In all my years serving in the Army, or in my time studying leadership and motivation while earning my PhD, I can honestly say I never witnessed an organizational culture this punitive, where the dominant leadership tactic was to instill fear in subordinates. At Wilson, fear appears to be the intended management style of senior leaders within the school. And there are many people much smarter than me that will tell you it's absolutely impossible for a modern organization to achieve peak performance when the dominant employee sentiment is fear of management. My request of the elected board is simple. Please investigate this organizational culture at Wilson before we lose yet another exceptional educator. Please do everything in your power to make Wilson a district where teachers feel empowered, appreciated, inspired, and proud to be a Bulldog. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next, we have Elena Nellis.
Hi, my name's Elena Nellis. I have a 9-year-old at Green Valley, and I'm here just to say everything that Nicole Bowman has already said. I just stopped last year practicing as a pediatric occupational therapist, and the whole thing I went to college for is basically why it's just supporting why these kids need recess. I'm seeing in a lot of other states, like, everyone is getting much, much, much more recess, and all of the schools in our area are just not following suit, and I don't understand why. It just seems very easy to me. So, but yeah, Nicole basically said everything that I'm feeling. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other business from the board? Okay, hearing none, looking for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Hopp, thank you, we are adjourned.